Hey there, welcome. I'm here to help you relax tonight. So before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It really makes us feel like the global community it is. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's begin our evening together. Story 6. The Hometown Visit. The letter was typed on crisp, expensive stationery, the kind that felt like a threat. It arrived at my office, bypassing my home, my unlisted address. It knew where to find me. Ms. Evans, your presence is requested at the upcoming Founders Day Gala in Ravenswood. As this year's most successful absentee, your town is eager to celebrate you. A car will be sent. Accommodations have been arranged. We do so hope you can make it. It would be a shame for anyone to be disappointed. The Ravenswood Heritage Committee. The signature was a flourish of ink. The threat was in the subtext. We know where you work. We know you don't come home. Come willingly, or we'll make sure you're remembered here in a very different way. Ravenswood wasn't my hometown. It was my birthright of quiet resentment and polished lies. I'd fled its quaint, suffocating embrace the second I turned 18, trading its manicured lawns for city grime and beautiful anonymity. I was Elena now, not Lainey, the odd, quiet girl with the strange family. I'd built a life they couldn't touch. Until now. The car was a sleek, black sedan with tinted windows. The driver didn't speak. He just nodded, his eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses, and held the door open. The message was clear. This wasn't an invitation. It was an extraction. The drive was a silent, rolling anxiety attack. Every familiar landmark was a tombstone for a memory I tried to bury. The old oak tree where the kids had dared each other to touch the haunted bark. The drugstore where I'd bought my first makeup, a tiny act of rebellion. The town limits sign, Ravenswood, where tradition blooms. Tradition, their word for control. The accommodations were my childhood home. It had been kept up, a museum to a life I'd rejected. The air inside was still and smelled of lemon polish and old secrets. My old room was exactly as I'd left it. Posters of bands they'd hated. Books on art they'd called a waste of time. It was a stage set, waiting for the prodigal daughter to return to her role. The gala was that night. A dress, elegant, conservative, expensive, was laid out on the bed. My size, of course. The town hall was decked out in bunting and false smiles. Everyone was there. The faces were older, thicker, but the eyes were the same, assessing, judging, hungry for gossip. They descended on me like well-dressed vultures. Lainey, you look so urban. We followed your career. So unconventional. Your mother would have been so proud. A lie. My mother had been proud of nothing but my ability to conform, a skill I never mastered. I smiled, I nodded, I died a little inside with every empty compliment. This was their punishment. To remind me that no matter how far I ran, I was still theirs. The mayor, a man with a face like a glad hand and eyes like a shark, took the podium. He droned on about tradition, community, the unbreakable bonds of Ravenswood. Then he called me up. Our very own success story. Elena Evans. The applause was a sound of swallowing. I walked to the podium, my heels clicking on the floor like a death knell. I looked out at the sea of smiling, expectant faces. And I saw him. He was standing at the back of the room, half in shadow. He wasn't smiling. He was just watching. He was older, lines etched around his eyes, but I'd know him anywhere. David, my high school boyfriend. The one I'd left without a word. The one whose heart I'd broken to save my own. His gaze wasn't angry. It was intense, curious, as if he were studying a specimen under glass. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. My prepared speech evaporated. I mumbled something generic about foundation and community, my eyes locked on his. When I finished, the applause felt hollow. The crowd parted for me as I stepped down, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. I had to get out. I needed air. I pushed through a side door into a deserted hallway, leaning against the cool wall, trying to steady my breathing. A hand touched my elbow. I jumped. It was Mrs. Henderson, my old history teacher. Her face was a web of wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp. Elena, she said, her voice low. You shouldn't have come back. What? What? This town, she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. It doesn't like people who leave. It considers it a personal insult. The Heritage Committee, it's not about celebration. It's about reclamation. They want you back in the fold. Or they want to make an example of you. An example? What are you talking about? But she was already pulling away, her face smoothing into a bland smile as someone called her name. "Enjoy your stay, dear," she said loudly, and melted back into the crowd. I was left alone in the hallway, a cold dread pooling in my stomach. Reclamation. The word echoed in my head. The letter. The car. The perfectly preserved room. It wasn't nostalgia. It was a trap. I fled the gala. I walked through the silent, manicured streets, the sound of my own footsteps too loud. The feeling of being watched was a physical pressure between my shoulder blades. I reached the house. The door was unlocked. I was sure I'd locked it. I stepped inside. Nothing was out of place, but the air was different, colder, and there was a smell, faint, metallic, like ozone and old coins. On the pristine kitchen table, where there had been nothing before, sat a single, old-fashioned key on a rusted ring. Next to it, a Polaroid photograph. The photo was of me, taken from behind, just moments ago, as I walked up the street to the house. My head was down, my shoulders hunched. I picked up the key. It was cold, familiar. It was the key to the old storm cellar in the backyard. A place I was forbidden to go as a child. A place my father had kept locked, always. The message was undeniable. The invitation was over. The game had begun, and the first move was mine. The key felt like a shard of ice in my hand. The Polaroid was a violation, a silent proclamation that my every move was observed. The quaint, sleeping town outside the window was no longer familiar. It was a gilded cage, and the doors had just been locked. Reclamation. Mrs. Henderson's word echoed. They didn't want to celebrate me. They wanted to assimilate me, to sand down my edges and force me back into the laney-shaped hole they'd kept empty for me. The storm cellar. My father had always been vague about its contents. Just old tools, he'd say, but his eyes would shift away. Dangerous for a child. Keep out. The lock was always fresh, the hasp shiny compared to the rusting door. I had to know. The key was an invitation to a truth they'd kept from me, or a test of my compliance. I slipped out the back door into the moonlit yard. The air was still, the only sound the crunch of my shoes on the dew-damp grass. The cellar doors were set into a small, grassy mound, angled against the house's foundation. They looked older than everything else, like a wound the town had tried to cover over. The new, shiny padlock was gone. In its place was an old, rusted hasp, seemingly waiting for this specific key. My hands trembled as I fit the key into the lock. It turned with a screech of protesting metal that seemed to tear the silent night in two. I froze, listening. No lights came on in the neighboring houses. No dogs barked. The sound had been swallowed by the town, absorbed into its secretive heart. I took a deep breath, gripped the cold metal ring, and heaved the doors open. A smell billowed out, damp earth, decay, and that same metallic ozone scent from the kitchen. A set of steep, rough-hewn stone steps descended into absolute blackness. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and pointed it down. The light barely penetrated the gloom, reflecting off wet stone and spider webs. I started down, the steps cold and slippery underfoot. The cellar was smaller than I remembered. It was a single, circular room of packed earth and stone, and it was not filled with tools. The walls were covered in writing. Names, dates, phrases, all carved into the stone or written in what looked like faded paint or blood. It was a ledger, a history, but not the one in the town hall museum. I moved the light slowly, reading. J. Miller refused the gift, 1923. The Henderson boy asked too many questions, 1951. M. Evans tried to leave, 1985. Evans, my family name, 1985, the year my Aunt Maureen vanished. The family story was that she'd run off to the city. But here it was. Tried to leave. This was the town's true history. Its dark sacrament. A record of those who didn't fit, who refused to play their part. This was what happened to the disappointments. In the center of the room was a simple stone altar. On it lay a single, leather-bound book. The cover was embossed with the same symbol from the Heritage Committee's letter, a stylized, flowering tree with deep, grasping roots. I opened it. The pages were filled with the same elegant script as the invitation. It was a history, a doctrine. It spoke of the soil of Ravenswood, A unique energy that blessed the town, ensured its prosperity, its peace, its perfect continuity. But the soil required loyalty. It required roots. Those who tried to leave drained it, weakened it. They were a sickness that had to be remediated. The book detailed the reclamation, a process, a ritual, to gently, persuasively, guide the wayward back to the fold, to make them see the error of their ways, to make them want to stay. And if persuasion failed, there were other methods. The cellar was the first step, a place for reflection, for understanding. The final page was a list. Names. My name was at the bottom. Elena Laney Evans. Seed of doubt. Awaiting reclamation. I dropped the book, my blood running cold. It was a cult. The whole town. A beautiful, manicured, smiling cult. And I was their next project. A sound from above made me jump. A soft thud. Then another. I turned off my phone's light, plunging myself into utter blackness. I held my breath, listening. The cellar doors were slowly, quietly, being closed. I lunged for the steps, scrambling up on my hands and knees. I was too late. With a final, echoing thud, the doors shut, sealing me in. A moment later, the screech of the lock turning echoed through the small space. I was trapped, in the dark, in the town's secret heart. Panic clawed at my throat. I beat my fists against the heavy wooden doors. Let me out. Please. Silence. Then, a voice. David's voice. Calm. Reasonable. It came from just outside. Laney, he said, his voice muffled by the wood. It's okay. Just breathe. We're here to help you. David, let me out. This is insane. It seems that way at first, he said, his voice gentle, like he was soothing a spooked animal. The darkness helps. It lets you see things clearly. The truth without all the noise of the outside world. I'm not staying here. You can't keep me here. We're not keeping you, Laney, he said. Another voice joined his. The mayor's. Then Mrs. Henderson's. A chorus of calm, concerned voices. We're caring for you, the mayor said. You're sick, Elena. You've been away too long. You're disconnected. We can help you remember who you are, where you belong. This is who I am. I don't belong here. You will, David said, his voice firming up, losing its gentle edge. Everyone does, eventually. The soil is patient. It's been waiting for you. We've all been waiting for you. A new sound started. A low, rhythmic humming. They were humming a song I recognized. The town's anthem, sung every Founder's Day. The sound vibrated through the doors, through the stone, seeping into my bones. It's easier if you don't fight it, Laney, David said, his voice almost a whisper now. Just listen to the song. Remember the good times. Remember us. The humming grew louder, filling the small space, pressing in on me from all sides. In the pitch black, my memories began to surface. Not the bad ones. The good ones. Summer picnics. Winter festivals. David's hand holding mine. The feeling of belonging, of being part of something whole. The panic began to recede, replaced by a warm, drowsy feeling. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was sick. Maybe this was where I was meant to be. No, the thought was a spark in the darkness. It was the conditioning, the ritual. They were using my own memories, my own homesickness, against me. I screamed, a raw, furious sound that tore through the humming. I remember you, David. I remember you cheating on me with Sarah Jenkins. I remember the lies. This isn't belonging. This is prison. The humming stopped. The silence that followed was shocked, angry. The mayor's voice came back, cold and hard. A recalcitrant seed. A shame. The soil requires deeper tilling. I heard them walking away. Their footsteps faded. I was alone in the dark, but not entirely alone. From the deepest corner of the cellar, where the phone's light had failed to reach, a new sound emerged. A soft, dry scraping sound, like bones moving across earth. The scraping stopped. The silence that followed was thicker, heavier than before. It was a listening silence. I pressed myself against the cold stone wall, trying to make myself small, to disappear into the darkness. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. A whisper, so faint it could have been the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears. Another one. I froze. The voice was dry, raspy, like leaves skittering across pavement. It came from the corner. Tried to leave. Another voice joined in, this one higher, reedy. They always try. They weren't voices from above. They were in here, with me. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers numb with terror. I swiped the screen, activating the flashlight. The beam cut through the blackness, shaking violently in my hand. I pointed it toward the corner. The light illuminated the far wall, the countless names of the recalcitrant. But in the corner, the earth was disturbed. It looked like something had been digging recently, and sitting with their backs against the wall were two figures. They were skeletal, draped in the rotten remnants of clothing. Their skin was pulled tight over bone, the color of old parchment. They didn't have eyes, just dark, empty sockets. But they were turned toward me. They were watching me. One of them, the smaller one, lifted a bony hand and pointed a finger at me. The finger had no nail, just a sharp, bony tip. Laney Evans. It rasped. "We remember your name. From the book." The other one let out a sound that might have been a laugh, a dry, rattling cough. "The book lies. It says we accepted the gift. It says we rejoined the soil." It gestured around the cellar. "This is not rejoining. This is being stored." They were the town's failures. The ones the reclamation hadn't worked on. The ones who had refused, even in the dark, to break. They weren't ghosts. They were preserved. A warning. A testament to the town's failure. And my future. The smaller one shifted, its bones scraping against the earth. "They will come for you at dawn. To till the soil, they will use the tools." It gestured with its head toward the altar. I looked. In the shadows behind it, I saw them. Rusted gardening tools. A spade. A trowel. Their edges were stained a dark, flaky brown. My stomach lurched. The deeper tilling. It wasn't a metaphor. "You must not be here when they come," the larger one said. "There is a way, for those who are truly lost." "Where?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "How?" The smaller one pointed a bony finger not at the doors, but at the wall behind me. The wall covered in names. "The wall weeps." It rasped. "When the moon is highest, the stone remembers the rain. Find the weeping stone, push." I turned and ran my hands over the cold, carved names. The stone was damp. I moved my hands frantically, feeling for a draft, a loose stone. My phone's light danced over the desperate graffiti of the damned. Then I found it. A section of wall near the floor, behind the altar, was wetter than the rest. A slow, constant trickle of water seeped from a crack between two stones. The weeping stone. I pushed. Nothing. I put my shoulder into it, straining with all my might. The skeletons watched, their empty sockets fixed on me. With a grating groan of stone on stone, the entire block shifted inward an inch. A rush of cold, damp air flowed out, carrying the smell of wet earth and freedom. It was an old escape route. Dug by whom? One of the previous occupants? Someone who had planned for this. I pushed again, my muscles screaming. The stone slid back, revealing a narrow, black hole, just large enough to crawl through. A tunnel. Where did it lead? "Go," the larger skeleton whispered. "Quickly, before the moon sets." "And Laney Evans," the smaller one added, its voice fading. "If you get out, run, and never, ever look back." I didn't need telling twice. I dropped to my hands and knees and scrambled into the hole. The tunnel was tight, muddy, and stank of rot. I crawled, my phone clenched in my teeth, the light bouncing ahead of me. I could hear the skeletons behind me, scraping the stone back into place, sealing my exit, in their own tomb. I crawled for what felt like an eternity, the tunnel angling upwards. Finally, I saw a pinprick of light ahead. Fresh air. I pushed forward, my lungs burning. I emerged in a thicket of brambles, gasping. I was on the edge of town, near the old creek. The moon was high. I could see the lights of the town hall in the distance. The gala was probably over. They would be coming for me soon. I had to move. I couldn't go back to the house. My car was there, but it was probably being watched. The town was the enemy. Every lighted window was an eye. I ran. I stuck to the shadows, behind hedges, through backyards. I was a ghost in my own hometown, a fugitive from a nightmare of welcome wagons and stone cellars. I made it to the old train tracks on the outskirts of town. The midnight freight was due. It was how I dreamed of leaving as a kid. It was my only chance now. I hid in the bushes, shivering, waiting. I heard a sound behind me. A twig snap. I turned. David was standing there. He wasn't calm anymore. His face was strained, angry. In his hand, he held one of the rusty tools from the cellar. A small, sharp trowel. "Laney," he said, his voice tight. "It didn't have to be this way. You could have been happy here. We could have been happy. This isn't happiness, David. It's a prison. It's a graveyard. It's home, he shouted, taking a step toward me. It's where we belong. Why can't you see that? He lunged at me. I sidestepped, and he stumbled past me. In the distance, I heard the low moan of the train whistle. I turned and ran down the tracks toward the sound. David was right behind me, his breath ragged with fury. The train lights appeared around the bend, powerful and blinding. I ran toward them, my feet slipping on the gravel. "Laney, stop!" David screamed. I didn't stop. I timed it perfectly, as I'd always dreamed of doing. As the engine roared past, I leaped, grabbing onto a ladder on one of the freight cars. I hauled myself up, my arms screaming in protest. I looked back. David was standing on the tracks, watching me, the trowel hanging limply at his side. The train was carrying me away, faster and faster. His figure grew smaller and smaller. But just before he was swallowed by the darkness, I saw him raise his hand. Not in a wave. He pointed at me. A promise. A threat. The town of Ravenswood disappeared into the night. But I knew. They knew my name. They knew my world. The soil had long roots. And it was patient. The train car was a freezing metal box, but it was freedom. I huddled in a corner, wrapped in my thin dress, shaking from adrenaline and cold. The rhythmic clatter of the wheels on the tracks was a mantra. Away, away, away. But with every mile, the terror didn't fade. It mutated. The calm, smiling faces of the townsfolk morphed in my mind into masks of fanatical devotion. David's final, pointing gesture wasn't just a threat. It was a tracking device. They knew I was gone. They would come. Reclamation. The word took on a new, horrific meaning. It wasn't just about bringing me back. It was about erasing the person I had become and reinstalling the obedient Laney. The cellar wasn't just for reflection. It was for reprogramming. And the tools. I shuddered, the image of the stained trowel flashing behind my eyes. The train slowed as it approached a major junction yard. This was my chance. I couldn't go to the authorities. What would I say? That my picturesque hometown was a murderous cult? They'd lock me in a psych ward, which would make me easier for Ravenswood to reclaim. Mrs. Henderson had said they had assets everywhere. How far did their roots extend? I jumped from the train while it was still moving, rolling into the gravel of the rail yard. I was bruised, scraped, and my expensive dress was torn and filthy. I looked like what I was, a fugitive. I used the last of my phone's battery to call the one person I thought might believe me. Marcus, an old college friend who was now a journalist. He was a skeptic, but he loved a good conspiracy. "Elena," he answered, his voice groggy with sleep. "Do you know what time it is?" "Marcus, listen to me. I don't have much time. I need your help. I need you to believe me." I spilled it all out in a rushed, frantic whisper. The letter, the gala, the cellar, the book, the skeletons, the tunnel. I expected him to laugh, to tell me I was having a breakdown. Instead, he was silent for a long moment. "Ravenswood," he finally said, his voice now wide awake and deadly serious. "I've heard that name before, in connection with some missing persons cases. Quiet, wealthy town. No loose ends. Law enforcement hits dead ends every time. It's a black hole. You believe me?" "I believe something very wrong is happening there," he said cautiously. "Where are you? I'll come get you. We need to get you somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't find you." He gave me an address, a safe house he used for whistleblowers, on the other side of the city. "Lay low. Don't use your cards. Don't trust anyone. I'll be there by morning." I spent the last of my cash on a bus ticket, keeping my head down, expecting a hand on my shoulder at any moment. The safe house was a drab, anonymous apartment. I locked myself in, barricaded the door with a chair, and finally allowed myself to collapse. I must have dozed off. I was woken by a soft, insistent knocking on the door. My heart leaped into my throat. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. Marcus stood there. He looked worried. He held up a bag of groceries. "Elena, you in there?" I brought food. A sob of relief escaped me. I fumbled with the locks and threw the door open. "Marcus, thank God." The words died in my throat. Standing behind Marcus, just out of view from the peephole, was David. He wasn't holding a trowel. He was holding a syringe. Marcus's face was pale, his eyes wide with apology and terror. "I'm sorry, Elena," he whispered. They had my sister." David stepped forward, his expression one of calm, professional efficiency. "The soil's roots run deep, Laney," he said. You can't escape a system that's part of the world itself. I tried to slam the door, but it was too late. David was strong. He forced his way in, grabbing my arm. I fought, kicking, scratching, screaming. "It's easier if you don't fight," he said, his voice maddeningly calm as he wrestled me to the ground. "This is just a sedative, to make the journey back peaceful." I felt the sharp prick in my neck. A cold warmth spread through my veins. The world began to swim, the edges of my vision darkening. The last thing I saw was Marcus's guilty, terrified face and David's satisfied smile. Reclamation. I woke up in my old room. The sun was streaming through the window. Birds were singing. It was a perfect Ravenswood morning. For a moment, I thought it was all a nightmare. A terrible, vivid dream. Then I moved. A dull ache in my neck, and a feeling of emptiness. A fog in my mind where my panic should have been, where my memories of escape should have been. The door opened. My father walked in. He was smiling, his eyes warm. "Lainey, you're awake. You gave us quite a scare last night. Sleepwalking again. You almost made it to the train tracks. Good thing David found you." David. The name should have sparked terror. It sparked nothing. A vague sense of familiarity. "David?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "David Miller. Your boyfriend? Don't you remember? You two are inseparable." He said it with such certainty, such warmth. He helped me downstairs. Breakfast was on the table. The mayor stopped by to see how I was feeling. Mrs. Henderson brought over a casserole. Everyone was so kind, so concerned. They talked about my episode, my stress-induced amnesia. They talked about my wonderful life here, my job at the library, my volunteer work with the Heritage Committee, my upcoming wedding to David. Wedding? I looked at my left hand. A simple, beautiful diamond ring sat on my finger. It felt right. But deep down, under the fog, a tiny, trapped part of me was screaming. This was wrong. This was all wrong. I was Elena. I lived in the city. I was an architect. But those memories felt distant, hazy, like a movie I'd seen once. The memories they were giving me, the library, the wedding plans, David's face, were bright, vivid, immediate. They felt real. David came over that afternoon. He took my hand. His touch was gentle. "Hey you," he said, smiling. "Welcome back." I looked into his eyes. They were kind, loving. The anger, the fanaticism I thought I'd seen, that was the nightmare. This was reality, wasn't it? We went for a walk through the town. Everything was perfect. The lawns were green. The streets were clean. People waved, called me by name. Lainey. They called me Lainey. I felt a sense of peace, of belonging. This was home. Why had I ever wanted to leave? But as we passed the town hall, I saw it. For a split second, the door to the basement, the door that should lead to the boiler room, wasn't a modern door. It was an old, wooden cellar door. And standing in front of it were two figures, skeletal and still. They looked at me, their empty sockets filled with a profound sadness. I blinked. It was gone. Just a modern metal door. "Everything okay?" David asked, squeezing my hand. "Yeah," I said, pushing the image away. A trick of the light. A fragment of the bad dream. That night, I sat at my vanity, brushing my hair. I looked at my reflection. Lainey Evans. Happy. Home. Safe. But my reflection, it blinked a second too late. And for a moment, its eyes were wide with pure, unadulterated terror. It mouthed a single, silent word. Run. I dropped the hairbrush. My heart was pounding. The fog in my mind receded, just for a second. The scream from the trapped part of me broke through. There in your mind. Fight it. Then it was gone. The fog returned, thicker, soothing. I picked up the hairbrush. My reflection was normal. Smiling. Happy. It was just a moment of dizziness. The doctor said I might have those. I finished brushing my hair and got into bed. David was already asleep. I curled up beside him. He was my rock, my future. As I drifted off, a final, clear thought surfaced. It wasn't my thought. It was theirs. Planted. Nurtured. You are home. You are loved. You are Lainey. And I believed it. Outside, under the perfect Ravenswood moon, the soil settled. Content. Another wayward seed had been reclaimed. Another root had been secured. The tradition would bloom forever.